it's definitely much better for the clients if there's like an agency in between, because it makes things a lot safer for both the talent and the client. Because the other thing that happens a lot when you're directly hired by a client is sometimes they take advantage of the talent a little bit. I'm not saying that's happened to me at any point. It's happened to me. But but there are some times that, like, you know, especially like if there's no cushion in between, they ask a little bit more than what they initially asked, and you can't really say no because they're like they could just yeet. And so a lot of times, like, I'll be doing a job and then they'll be like, hey, can you also do the translation? And I'm like, I don't recall that being part of our original conversation. And they were like, oh, no, it's like, you know, can you just do that? Like, we need you to do that. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, usually that's like an extra thing. And they're all like, well, I guess maybe then we just can't go forward with this at all. And I'm like, no, but I've already invested in this. Like, oh, no. And so, like, that happens more often than it should. So also having that sort of in between makes it a lot, like, again, I'm not saying it's definitely happened to me at any point, but but there are definitely times where, like, they'll spring a sudden, like, handshake event, or like a meet and greet. They're like, oh, can you do that? And I'm like, was that in the contract? And they're like, no, but we expect our talent that we bring over to do this, you know? And I'm like, oh, yes. Or they'll like spring, like, can you interpret for this other guest? And I'm like, I'm not an interpreter. But sure. Or like, can you translate this? Because our translators weren't that good. Or like, oh, can you brush up the English or the Japanese for this? Like, you know, we consider that part of your duties here. And I was like, it wasn't mentioned in the email, okay? So yeah, there's also that. Like, as a talent, I don't really necessarily want to be connected directly to my clients either, because, like, you know, as much as I think that everybody means really well, that happens a lot. That happens at least, I'm going to go ahead and say 30% of the time. Like, it's like a solid a third of the time that happens. It's way more often than it should. Way more often than it should. And then also, like, if there's any issue with the talent, like, you know, going directly to the client is not the best, because the client does not have the talent's best interests in mind. The client has the client's interests in mind, so the talent's always going to lose. But if there's management in between, then the management can be like, yo. So the management is there to protect both the client and the talent. 30% is a lot, guys. Oh, it's every time. I swear. That might even be an underestimate, because every time they're like, could you check the lyrics? And I'm like, wow, that's not my job. And then, you know, of course, I'm always credited for it. Never credited for any of it. 100% a lot of it's because I'm a foreigner. But they do this to anyone. Like, they're like, can we take like an extra few photos? My friend is a model, and she's always being asked for like an extra shot, an extra pose, an extra. And she's like, there was only 7 poses. Like, that was our agreement. And they're like, yeah, but just like an extra. And then they're like, can you post it on Instagram? Because she's really famous on Instagram. And she's all like, that's like, you know, Betsuryokin da yo. And like, they're all like, oh, but like, we hired you because you're, you know, so big on Instagram. So like, that was like part of like our expectation, so I guess we can just call this off. And she's already done the full day's worth of work, and they're like, I guess you're just not gonna get paid. And then she's like, what? So she'll end up having to do like that kind of thing, or like, you know, like an extra Instagram story or something. Like it's every time. Almost, like, even if you have like a like ironclad contract, like, honestly, contracts don't really matter. So like, they'll just be like, well, then forget it. It's like, you know? And like, the thing is that even if they do like abide by the contract and pay you, then they'll never ask for you again. And like 90% of this industry is you get the next job based off of a referral or somebody remembering you from the first job. So you can't cause a problem. So if they ask you for something extra and you don't have management to be like, actually no, and you go, actually no, they'll label you as a problem, and they'll be like, this person's hard to work with, they're not a team player, and then you don't get any jobs. So like, when I'm asked for like, you know, can you do interpretation for this other guest? My answer has to be, yeah, no problem, because I don't want to be like, no, because then they'll be like, oh, that's a diva, let's not invite that person to our next event because that person isn't a team player, right? So you kind of have to do it. and you can't really make a big stink about it, and like, extra shots if you're a model, or like, extra events or extra stages or staying after or interpreting for somebody else or fixing somebody else's lyrics, like that's, if they ask you to do it, you can't really say no because then you're a problem. And then they tell other people, everybody in this industry knows everyone else, so you have to be like really super like accommodating. But that's why having like a cushion in between, like an agency to be like, oh sorry, we're gonna have to like really stick with the contract, like then that's not the wish I could, but my manager, and like the managers always become the bad guy, but that's okay, that's their job. That's their job. Their job is Tiger Mom. And so yeah, Tiger Mom gets to say like, no, but we'd love to do this thing for you over here, and then they get you more work. But if it was me being like, oh, I wish I could, but I can't this time, maybe I can do it next time, they'll be like, we'll just hire somebody that's like more of a team player. It's so sad. Let me sing. Oh, I got myself all sad. We're singing now.